Check her bag. I saw her steal it. My brother's voice cracked like a whip, loud enough for the entire living room to turn its head. He was panting, clutching his chest like some heartbroken victim. And then came the final dagger. She took Grandma's ring. She's been jealous of me forever. I swear, the silence that followed carved into me sharper than any blade. Mom's gasp wasn't disbelief, it was certainty. Dad's eyes narrowed, not at him, but at me. In that split second, my entire worth was measured by their doubt. Why everyone? My name is Maribel, I'm 26. And in that moment, my blood whispered the cruelest question: how do you fight for truth when your own family prefers a lie? The officer was already in the house, his boots trailing mud across our cream carpet. He gave me a professional nod, but there was suspicion in his eyes, because who expects a crying son to be the liar? I felt my throat tighten as he stepped closer. He said, gently but firmly, I need to check your pulse. Every pair of eyes clung to me, Mom's folded arms, Dad's heavy sigh, my brother's crocodile tears dripping theatrically onto the floor. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, search him. Search his room. You'll see who he really is. But all I did was breathe in and hand over my bag. The leather creaked as the officer unzipped it. A hush spread through the room, thick enough to choke on. My brother leaned forward, almost smirking, like he could already taste victory. And then, there it was. The ring. Nestled in the corner pocket like it had always belonged to me. My knees trembled, heat rose up my neck, and still, not a word. I could hear my mother's whisper, I knew it. The officer glanced at me, about to say something official. But then his hand froze. Because beneath the ring, tucked too neatly in the fold, was something else. Something he didn't expect. He pulled it out slowly, brows furrowing, my brother's initials etched across the tiny cloth bag it had been hidden in. My brother's face drained of color. And that was the first crack in his performance. If this ever happened to you, say same in the comments. The air in that room shifted, but I stayed silent, my pulse thundering. Because sometimes the truth doesn't scream, it waits for the perfect silence to pierce. The officer held the tiny cloth bag between two fingers, turning it toward the light. The stitched initials glided back like a confession no one wanted to read. CR, he said evenly, his eyes sliding to my brother. That's you, isn't it? My brother's lips parted, but no sound came. The fake sobs had evaporated, leaving only a twitch of panic in his jaw. Dad stepped forward, frowning. What is this supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were trembling too hard, my chest hollow from the weight of their betrayal. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see the truth unraveling in front of them. But then my brother snapped back to life, his voice shaking with false indignation. She's framing me. Don't you see? She put the ring in my bag first, so when it showed up, she could flip it on me. He turned to the officer, eyes wet again, weaponizing his tears. She's always hated me. She said she'd ruin me one day. The lies crawled across the room like smoke, filling every corner until even I couldn't breathe. Mom clutched her chest, nodding slowly as if his words made sense. Dad muttered, that sounds possible. Possible. That word cracked me harder than the accusation itself. The officer's gaze flicked between us, calculating, but professional neutrality kept him silent. He tucked the ring and the cloth bag into evidence. We'll need to resolve this formally, he said, his tone clipped. I stared at my parents, searching their faces for even an ounce of belief in me. Nothing. Only the same dull disappointment they'd always reserved for me, like I'd been born guilty. But my brother, he couldn't meet my eyes. And that told me everything. The seed of fear was planted, and I knew it was only a matter of time before his perfect act collapsed completely. The question was, would I survive the storm before that moment came? And in the quiet hum of the officer's radio, I felt the story shifting, against him, not me. The officer clipped his pen back into his notebook, his expression unreadable. Both of you will need to come down to the station. We'll file a formal statement, and the evidence will be held until this matter is resolved. My stomach lurched. A station. A record. Even if I was innocent, the stain would cling to me forever. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, my brother jumped in, pressing his advantage. Of course, officer. I'll cooperate with anything. I just want my grandmother's memory respected. His tone dripped with sincerity, but I caught the flicker of triumph in his eyes. Mom touched the officer's sleeve. Please, just do what you have to. I can't bear to watch this shame any longer. Her words stabbed deeper than the accusation itself. Shame. She wasn't even waiting for proof. She had already decided I was the disgrace. I whispered, almost to myself, "You really believe him?" But no one answered. The silence told me enough. The officer gestured toward the door. "We'll drive together. Both sides of the story will be heard." I grabbed my purse back from the table, my fingers brushing the empty space where the ring had been. A cold rage began to anchor itself in me. I hadn't planned this fight. But now, something inside me vowed I wouldn't just clear my name, I'd expose him so thoroughly that even his crocodile tears wouldn't save him. As we stepped outside, the night air slapped me awake. The cruiser lights flashed against the siding of our house, painting everything in red and blue. My brother shuffled behind me, pretending to wipe his eyes, but I caught the curl of his lips, a smirk he thought no one could see. I saw it. And I memoized it. Because one day, that same smirk would be the evidence that ended him. The officer opened the back door of the cruiser for me, his voice steady, Please." I slid inside, heart pounding, watching the reflection of my brother's false innocence in the glass. The ride wasn't just to the station. It was the beginning of my reckoning. The police station smelled of burnt coffee and paper, sterile, unforgiving. The officer led us into separate rooms, a thin wall dividing our voices. I sat in a chair too stiff to be comfortable, my palms damp against the metal table. A recorder clicked on. "State your name." "Maribel Ray," I whispered, my throat dry. The officer leaned forward, pen poised. "Tell me what happened." I inhaled slowly, fighting the tremor in my voice. "I didn't steal that ring. I would never steal anything. My brother planted it in my purse. He's been jealous for years. Every achievement I had, he twisted into resentment. Tonight was his stage. He wanted me ruined." I detailed the cloth bag, the initials, the smirk he couldn't hide. The officer scribbled, occasionally glancing up, searching my face for cracks. But my truth was steady now, rising through the cracks of humiliation like grass through pavement. When I finished, he nodded, almost imperceptibly. "All right." Through the wall, I heard muffled tones, my brother's voice rising, cracking under pressure. He was over-explaining. Repeating himself. Anger bleeding through the carefully rehearsed sorrow. The officer returned with a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Interesting. His statement doesn't quite match yours. In fact, it contradicts itself more than once." A warmth spread across my chest, but it wasn't relief. It was vindication beginning to take root. Still, the damage lingered. My parents had called earlier, siding with him before the dust had even settled. Their words replayed in my mind like broken glass. "We can't handle this shame. Why would you do this?" Even if the law cleared me, their judgment wouldn't fade. The officer closed his notebook. "We'll hold the evidence overnight. You're free to go for now. But I suggest you prepare yourself. Truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, it won't be gentle." As I stepped back into the night air, my brother's eyes caught mine from across the lobby. For the first time, his expression wasn't smug. It was tight. Strained. He knew the lie was fraying. And I knew I wouldn't let him patch it. The ride home was suffocating. The cruiser's taillights faded, leaving only the orange glow of our porch light waiting like a silent judge. My parents stood in the doorway, their faces etched with disappointment, not in him, but in me. Mom's voice was clipped, brittle. "You've embarrassed us enough for one night. Go to your room." Her words struck like a gavel. No trial, no defense. Just sentencing. I glanced at my brother. He stood just behind her, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. But his eyes, oh, they betrayed him. There was fear swimming under that surface calm, fear that the cracks from the station would reach here. I climbed the stairs slowly, each creak beneath my feet echoing like a countdown. In my room, I locked the door, pressed my forehead against the cool wood, and let the silence swallow me. On my desk lay my journal, pages filled with months of notes, his insults, his manipulations, the times he lost money that was never his, the way he twisted our parents against me. Tonight was not an isolated betrayal. It was the climax of years of small poisons. I began to write again, documenting every detail: the officer's discovery, the initials, my brother's contradictions. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a record, a weapon sharper than any blade. Downstairs, muffled voices rose. My brother was spinning his narrative, painting me as unstable, manipulative, ungrateful. And my parents? They drank in every word. I closed my journal, a cold calm settling over me. If they wouldn't believe the truth spoken, they'd believe it revealed. I would gather proof so undeniable it would leave them no room to twist it. Because betrayal, once planted, grows differently in each heart. In mine, it was no longer despair. It was strategy. I opened my window, the night air cool against my skin, and whispered to the dark. You wanted me ruined, brother. But you forgot, every lie has a trail. And I've already started following yours. The next morning, sunlight felt harsher than usual, cutting across my room like interrogation lights. I hadn't slept. My journal sat open on the desk, pages heavy with inked truth. I tucked it into my drawer, locked it, and slipped the key into my pocket. Today wasn't about surviving, it was about observing. Downstairs, the smell of burnt toast clung to the kitchen. My brother was already there, slouched in his chair, eyes shadowed. He looked smaller than usual, like the night had stolen something from him. But when he noticed me, his shoulders squared, and the smirk returned. Morning, thief, he said, casually biting into his toast. My jaw tightened. Funny. That cloth bag with your initials didn't look very stolen. Mom snapped. Enough, both of you. We won't live like this. But her glare landed only on me. Always me. I studied him, though, closely. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his cup. His overconfidence was cracking, and cracks spread fast when pressure mounted. Later that day, I found my chance. His room door was ajar, unusual for someone so guarded. On his desk lay a crumpled receipt, half hidden under notebooks. I pulled it free, my pulse quickening. Jewelry store. Dated 2 days ago. A repair for a clasp, on a ring. My breath caught. Grandma's ring. He hadn't stolen it last night. He'd had it longer, long enough to plan this. I slid the receipt into my pocket just as footsteps creaked down the hall. His voice called, sharp and suspicious. What are you doing in there? I turned, holding his gaze with the calmest smile I could muster. Looking for the truth. And I think I just found a piece of it. His face drained, then hardened into rage. Stay out of my stuff. But the damage was done. For the first time, I held a card he couldn't explain away. And deep inside, I knew this wasn't just survival anymore. This was war, and the evidence was stacking in my favor. By evening, the house felt like a stage, every shadow carrying tension. My brother paced the living room, restless, his phone glued to his hand. I sat quietly at the dining table, the jewelry receipt folded neatly in my pocket like a loaded weapon. Dad returned from work, exhaustion lining his face. I got a call from the officer today, he announced. The words cut through the room. My brother froze mid-step. He said your stories didn't line up. That ring bag, it's suspicious. For once, Dad's eyes didn't pierce me. They lingered on him. My brother's smile was too quick, too forced. Dad, he's confused. She's twisting everything. You know how she is. His voice wavered. I leaned forward, my tone calm, measured. Then explain this. I placed the receipt on the table, sliding it across the wood. Mom squinted. What is this? Proof, I said, my gaze locked on my brother. He took Grandma's ring to a jeweler days before the so-called theft. He planned this. He planted it. My brother lunged for the paper, but Dad snatched it first. His eyes scanned, then darkened. Is this true? Silence. A silence thicker than any lie he'd ever spun. His throat bobbed, no words coming. Mom's face crumpled, torn between instinctive defense and creeping doubt. Tell me it isn't, son. But he couldn't. His hands shook. His lips parted, then closed again. The facade was cracking in real time, each second a hammer strike. I felt a steadying calm wash over me, not triumph, but something colder. Vindication. For once, The weight of disbelief shifted off my shoulders and onto his. Dad slammed the receipt onto the table. You've disgraced us all. My brother's eyes flicked to me, hatred searing through the panic. He knew I had cornered him. But he also knew something else. This wasn't over. He would fight dirty. And in that moment, I realized, exposing him to our parents wasn't enough. His lies had to unravel so completely that no shadow remained for him to hide in. This was only the beginning of his fall. The house was silent the next morning, as if shame itself had wrapped the walls in heavy cloth. My brother hadn't come down for breakfast. Dad sat with a newspaper untouched in front of him, Mom staring blankly at her tea. I walked into the kitchen, the air still thick with last night's confrontation. Neither of them spoke, so I did. I'm going back to the station today, I said softly. The officer deserves to know everything. The receipt, the lies, all of it. Mom's eyes flickered with guilt, the kind that comes too late. Dad only nodded. Do what you have to. Truth needs to be heard. Those words, so simple, felt like a quiet victory. For once, he wasn't doubting me. At the station, I handed the officer the receipt. His brows lifted, and for the first time since this nightmare began, his voice held certainty. This seals it. Your brother staged the theft. The report will reflect that. The relief that poured through me wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, like the exhale I'd been holding for years. That evening, when the officer arrived at our door with the final statement, my brother's mask finally shattered. He tried to argue, but every word slid off like water against stone. His lies had nowhere left to cling. Mom wept quietly. Dad stood firm. And me? I simply watched. Because revenge wasn't screaming or throwing his betrayal back in his face. It was this, standing tall in silence while the truth did all the cutting. Later, in my room, I pulled out my journal. I wrote the final line beneath pages of pain and betrayal. Justice doesn't need noise. It only needs proof, and time. I closed the book, slid it into my drawer, and locked it away. Not because I needed it anymore, but because I'd already lived the ending. As I turned off the light, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the family's disgrace. I saw the one who endured, who waited, who won quietly. And that was enough.